So good morning, everybody. Can everyone hear me at the back of the room? Okay, perfect. So thank you all for joining us today, sharing your Friday morning with us. We really appreciate it. Today we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about our business, and I thought a good place for us to start is for you to understand LinkedIn, the platform, and LinkedIn, the company, because that's very important to understand where we're headed and where we've come from. So I was thinking about our conversation that we were going to have this morning, and I thought it was important to understand how we thought about building out our business. Now, LinkedIn, we believe, connects talent to opportunity at a massive and unprecedented scale today. And the way we're able to do this is through having a laser-like focus on our company's mission. And our company's mission is to connect the world's professionals to make them more successful and more productive. And so you've got to understand how we're doing this by focusing on our consumers, our members, if you like. Our members, we have three core value propositions for them. The first is called identity, the second insights, the third everywhere. Identity is all about making it easier for you to connect, find, and be found. LinkedIn today is the professional profile of record for hundreds of millions of professionals globally. It is the first professional face that most people display when they want to express their skills, express their experience, and what they represent. When you talk about insights, that's, I think, a little more interesting, but definitely for me personally. I think when I talk to more and more professionals, this is the part of the network which is most appealing to them. They are turning to LinkedIn in numbers to find out more about their competitors, their vendors, their suppliers, but more and more so about the companies they work for, as well as in many cases about themselves. How are they being perceived by their peers, by other professionals? So insights is a very interesting place, and it's all about being great at what you do today. So that's the second consumer value proposition. The third part is everywhere. We appreciate the fact that you work in a mobile work environment today. You are not tethered to your desktops. You have your smartphones, your tablet computers, and you need to have access to your network, access to the insights that I talked about at your fingertips. And so making this available on any professional tool that you choose is critical to our success, critical to your success. And so if I could pause there for a second and talk about how we went about developing our iPad app. It's a highly successful and popular application. But if you look at the LinkedIn app for iPad, we looked at tablet computers and we tried to assess how professionals use them. We found that there were two core things that people were trying to do on their tablets. The first thing was to organize their professional calendar. It was all about thinking about the meetings you're going to have today, or perhaps at the end of the day, organizing your meetings for the next day. The second thing you were using your tablet computers for was to get news, business news in the professional context. And so when we built the LinkedIn app for iPad, we built it around your professional calendar and around LinkedIn today, the professional news that you can use. So that's just an example of how we're going about building our products. And a big part of it is how you want us to develop these tools. So I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about all the products we've developed, but I can tell you this. In the last few months, the number of consumer-oriented features that we've rolled out is probably the most that we have done in the history of this company. And the focus has been to drive more value, to circle back. We've learned a lot about our members in the last few years in particular. And we wanted to drive more value, take some of the feedback that we've been getting, and influence that into product design. So one of the features I wanted to talk about was endorsements. So this is a feature we rolled out a few weeks ago. Just actually by a show of hands, how many of you are aware of this feature? Okay, so a handful. The goal here was to have a lightweight mechanism for you to be able to showcase the skills that you've developed. We all know that today a hiring manager hires for skills and attitude. It's the skills that you developed through all the experience that you want to be able to showcase. So going back to the thing I talked about, the consumer value proposition of identity, we wanted a way for you to be able to show the skills that you developed, and then for you to leverage that network that you have to get them to endorse you for those skills, right? And so the virality behind that sort of just plays out, and it gives you a great way to build out that identity of yourself. And so today, if you look at the average consumer profile, you have this identity at the bottom, at a portion of their profile, they have their skills listed out. And it allows you to talk about yourself in a holistic manner, not just your functional skill set. So this is an HR leader, so he's talking about human resources and team building, but also some of the more eclectic things such as awesomeness, which he's put down over here. Right? Well, 3 people endorsed him, so clearly he is awesome. But that's really one way in which we're trying to help that particular value. Another feature I wanted, and so, the result of this is we've reached a heartbeat today of about 8 million daily endorsements. This is just in an order of, a couple of weeks. The other feature I wanted to spend some time talking to you about was this whole aspect of influencers. I talked about insights. Insights is about the data that's being generated through all your actions and interactions, but it's also about people influencing other people. And we have a number of influencers and thought leaders on LinkedIn today, people who maintain an active profile, people like Richard Branson. And so we realized that these individuals were reaching out to us and saying, listen, I need a broader canvas. I want to be able to publish long format content. Can you help us with that? And so we did. And we rolled this feature out a couple of weeks ago. And in short order, we were able to find that, obviously, this number, by the way, is way out to date. I got to almost update this on a daily basis. But obviously, in the case of Richard Branson, hundreds of thousands of followers. And in his very first posting, tens of thousands of likes, thousands of comments. So clearly, the network is getting value and insights out of these thought leaders. We've invested in this to the tune of having over 150 global thought leaders, everyone from the President of the United States, spiritual thought leaders like Deepak Chopra, to business leaders from this part of the world, folks such as Mikutani-san, who runs Rakuten in Japan, and Kai-Fu Lee. The result of this is we've had, in just a few weeks now, 2 million people follows. Again, this is about insights. How can you tap into the people who you respect, people who are influencing your professional career? Now, the result of all of this, we have over 187 million members on LinkedIn today, and we're adding 2 members every second of every day. In this part of the world, in Asia, we have 34 million members. And in at least 7 countries, we have over 1 million members. So this is one of our most vibrant and fastest growing regions in the world for membership. Now, based on this platform, we have 3 business lines. But what you are gathered here today is to talk about our largest and fastest growing business line, that is Talent Solutions. At the core of it all is this phenomenon, this huge seismic shift that's happening in your world. And that is a shift from post and pray, a world we're all familiar with, where you put out your job posting and then pray that the right person responds. Really pray. As a hiring manager, I can speak to that. And in this part of the world, in a strong job market, what's going to happen? You know the answer. You're going to have tens of thousands of respondents. Then you're going to have to hire some smart people to sift through all these resumes, find something that's attractive, and hopefully find the right individual. Well, most sharp recruiters are making a shift from this world to a world where they can source passive candidates at scale. Whether it's a specialized skill, such as a popcorn food scientist, or if you want to find the engineer who designed the Mars rover, they have their profiles on LinkedIn today. Even if you're not looking for such a specialized or eclectic skill set, we find that over 12,000 companies today, over 12,000 companies today are using our enterprise product, LinkedIn Recruiter. But let's take a step back. I talked about 187 million professionals. What does that look like? It looked like that back there. How are our recruiters reaching out to these people? Well, they're using their networks, they're branding, they're engaging, they're attracting these people. And in our experience, the world's best recruiters are thinking like the world's best marketers. Well, marketing starts with one thing, the brand. And so today we thought we'd spend some time with you talking about the recruitment equivalent of that, the employment brand. So to talk to you through that, I wanted to welcome on stage our APAC Head of Solutions, Tim Grogan, who's going to talk to you about employment brand, and then hopefully lead a very interesting conversation with our customers and talk you through what our understanding of this exciting part of your space is. Thank you very much. Tim?
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. And thanks, Hari, for that kind introduction. I think Hari touched on some really interesting points. That notion that recruiters need to start thinking about marketers. And the branding, we're all very familiar with branding. We've grown up around brands. We're consumers at the heart. We're influenced by advertising every day. And if we look at these two very famous logos, instantly we actually have a perception as to which one we're more aligned to. I could probably do a little poll here now. In fact, we can. Who prefers Coke? Who prefers Pepsi? Oh, poor Pepsi. Gee whiz. But it's interesting. We're very aligned straight away to Coke. We have a sense of what that means, what that drink represents, and what that means for us to be seen drinking Coke. So if I ask the same question, which company is a better company to work for? Hands up, who would be able to make a decision whether Coke or Pepsi is a better employer? And so it's pretty interesting. Instantly, we're not as confident, or actually don't really have a perception as to who is actually a better employer, yet we're very familiar with these brands. And that's really the evolution that we've seen over the last, really over the last 10 years, where employer branding has really started to become very driven within HR circles. There's really two sides to sort of that marketing equation. There's the consumer brand, which we saw how emotional and connected we were there to Coke, but yet we weren't so confident as to know who is actually a better employer and what it actually means to work for either Coke or for Pepsi. And you've got to start to take a step back. Why has that evolution changed? Why is employer branding becoming something that HR professionals are really starting to drive and trying to educate marketers as to why that's important? And it comes down to this whole notion of that post and pray that Hari talked about. The challenges recruitment functions have had is actually connecting and finding quality talent. At the very heart of employer branding, it's about how do we get better talent into our organisation. And part of that change has been more of the functions being developed. So we said, well, why don't we start to bring talent acquisition capability within our organisation? And once we are able to have people who are in charge of recruitment, then how do we start to connect with the right type of people? And really employer branding is actually at the heart, is actually storytelling. How do we effectively tell the right story about who we are and influence the right type of people that we want to bring into our organisation? And that notion is what really started probably in about sort of 2005, where this whole term of an employment value proposition. What's our proposition? What are we actually leveraging when we go to market that differentiates us from our competitors? What are our competitors saying? And how do we consistently communicate that? If you think about your own organisations today and you grabbed 5 hiring managers that you partner with and you said, just quickly, how do you explain the company if you were talking to a candidate? What story would you tell? And if you went and spoke to 5 different people in your company, how consistent would that story be? What would they leverage? What points would they make that to actually help perhaps sell and educate that person about that career opportunity with your company? And that's really what starts to be at the heart of employer branding. The consistent way you start to tell the story to actually attract the right quality of talent in the organisation. And social recruiting, if you think, or the emergence of social media, the notion of being able to actually find and connect and get information and make decisions is fundamentally changed. If you think about yourself as consumers today and how you buy products, if you're going on a holiday, it's a great example. It's easy to go to a website now and think, well, I'm looking at the hotel. Hotel could look fantastic. I'll make a decision whether I stay there. But then what you might look at is what are the comments about that hotel? What have other people said about that hotel? Now, if someone says it's not very good service, if someone says that the room wasn't very tidy, you're influenced by that comment and you won't stay at that hotel. And so we need to be mindful today how people are starting to change the way they make decisions from a consumer perspective, but also they're starting to make decisions about the way they actually move and choose their careers. Who's the next employer I want to work with? What information can I find about them? And that's where we need to be really mindful of how we start to educate and promote yourselves in a very clear way. What's really interesting is we ran some recent survey research within LinkedIn, and we actually wanted to find out how valuable they found the employer brand. And I think the statistics are quite interesting. A company's employer brand is twice as likely to drive job consideration as its company brand. Twice as likely. So some of you may work for really household brands, and marketing may say to you, hey, you know what? You should have no problem. We are company X. Everyone knows who we are. But how well are you understood by the type of people that you bring into that organisation? I worked with a very large energy company most recently, and one of the things they said to me is, you know what, everyone knows who we are, but we cannot attract sales and marketing professionals to come work for our organisation. We're just not top of mind with those experts who work in the FMCG world to think about ourselves as an energy company that we have marketing capability. So right there, even though they have a well-known consumer brand, they're challenged in specific labour segments, being marketing and sales, to attract the right quality of talent. How do they address that? How do they start to educate the marketers and the sales professionals about actually what you would do within that company, what is exciting about working for them, and how do you differentiate yourself from the other people that you're competing against? And here's an interesting insight. This is actually the employer brand for Pepsi. And so I encourage you actually go and do a bit of Googling and have a look at the way Pepsi actually position themselves. You know, you don't have to be a global entity like a Pepsi to really actually help develop and manage an employer brand. Possibilities is a one brand touch. So from the moment that you actually see a recruitment ad to you go to their corporate website, to you go to their LinkedIn page, to actually when you go to have an interview with Pepsi, the whole room is branded around possibilities. The collateral that you get is branded around possibilities. There's a whole depth and meaning as to what it means to work at Pepsi and how they differentiate themselves from their competitors. And Coke's not, of course, the only competitor that Pepsi have. You know, they're logistics people. They could be competing for talent against FedEx. All of those things have to be considered. And how do you position yourself to differentiate yourself in that market? And so brands could be a brand could be like Pepsi, or one sense of we want one clear vision. But you could also be a brand. One of you guys might work for a company that actually could be one of the greatest places to work, but you're not really understood. People really don't know who you are. How do you actually go forward and start to promote yourself to the people that you want to influence? And employer branding strategy is actually starting to think about recruitment from a reactive notion. Reactive is where someone says, you know what, Johnny's leaving, I need to replace him. Can you start quickly going through and doing the post and pray and getting? To imagine if we knew John was an engineer, imagine we could be more proactive. Imagine if we could actually start to identify who are the next type of people we want out in an organisation. What if you actually could start to build relationships, build a talent pipeline of people who are the right type of people to work in your organisation? And imagine you could actually fill that role a lot quicker with a better quality of person. And to do that, what's happening today is people are starting to invest money away from those reactive channels into a more of a proactive way. If we tell more people about who we are, if we really help articulate our brand, our proposition, what it means to work here, we can get more people interested. If we get more people interested, then we can actually start to canvas that interest and start to harness that power of that in a really proactive way. So when a role comes up, we don't have to be thinking about what are we going to do, how are we going to fill this role. We've built relationships and we can start to farm those relationships. And that's at the heart of what really strong employer branding strategy is all about. For those who haven't gone on that journey of an employer branding, this is an interesting architecture of how people sort of position the employer brand alongside their corporate brand. And at the very heart, of course, your corporate identity is still absolutely key. Your values, your vision, your mission, your personality. Employer brand here, you can see what's the compelling heart of the offer, all right? And you need to think about that. Now today, for those who might say, well, we don't have an employer brand, you actually do. Because if you're recruiting people and you're retaining people, you're telling a story day in, day out to actually get people to come and work for your organisation. Every bit of communication you're doing today is a reflection of your employer brand. You just might not be calling it, but you're telling stories. Storytelling is part of employer branding. And so to actually start to be more considerate about that, you want to start to align back to this heart of what is your value proposition. The attributes that attract and retain talent. And they differ depending on the needs. And you need to understand what those attributes are to actually really make your offer credible and, more importantly, differentiate yourself. So if you know you compete for talent against a large organisation, what are they saying to get the right people? And how do you match up? Because if you know you have a better offer, I often talk to clients and they say, you know, we've got some amazing things. We've got some incredible benefits. And I'm like, are you telling anybody? And the offer is, not really. So how do we start to actually promote? If you think about, Hari said about the principles of marketing, if you think about Coca-Cola as another example, we all know who Coca-Cola is, but yet continuously they advertise and promote the brand. The reason being is they stop advertising, sales in Coke actually go down. We has to keep top of mind. That's the heart of what advertising is about. And that's the challenge and that's the evolution that's happening in HR now. HR professionals saying, you know what, we need to start promoting who we are because it's competitive to get top talent. And that's the big shift. How do we position ourselves so people are aware and we can attract that right quality of talent? One of the key things, of course, is HR all of a sudden saying, well, we need to do things differently. We're transforming as a function. We're thinking differently about talent. We're taking a more of a proactive approach. That costs money. We need to invest money in certain areas. Historically, we haven't done that. You need to have these discussions with your CFOs and your CEOs at a senior level that you want to invest money. And of course, like any business decision, it needs to show a return of investment. Now, it's been well documented, and in fact, our research showed as well that actually a well-managed employer brand, a well-articulated employer brand, actually reduces the cost per hire. people don't just join companies for remuneration. They join for the full package. You need to understand and promote what those attributes are to really create interest. What we also noticed, and this makes sense, if we promote the employer brand that is a real reflection of our culture, our values, who we are, that actually when they join, that actually has a bigger impact on engagement and has a big impact on retention. And so it's important when you start thinking yourselves as HR professionals to say we're changing our strategy, we're implementing a new way of doing business, we're promoting ourselves, but we're going to measure it. We're going to measure it on what impact this has had. And so if we're allocating new costs, investing in new ways, we're going to actually be able to measure that success. And that's what's really important for yourselves to start thinking about strategically how you position this to your leaders. So how can you leverage your employer brand in LinkedIn? One of the things that I think Hari articulated well is that it's really important to remember that people are joining LinkedIn to manage their identities. In fact, we ran a recent survey asking them to name the top 10 reasons as to why people joined LinkedIn. To find a job is actually number 8. So there's 7 reasons that are all around that networking and that connections that Hari spoke about. And this is where it's really a really exciting opportunity for talent professionals, because what you're finding now is a new way actually to connect to what we call that passive candidate. In fact, we ran a survey recently also to say, do you classify yourself as an active candidate? Active candidate, someone who's actively looking for a job, someone who visits the job boards on a regular basis, or a passive candidate, someone who's very comfortable, happy in the role that they're in. 80% of people on LinkedIn classify themselves as a passive candidate. I'm there managing my identity. And this is where it creates a very unique opportunity for you to start to socialize who you are and socialize the career opportunities within your organizations to an audience that you're actually not able to connect with very effectively. And we're able to help you, and I want to show you ways that you can do that, where not only do you leverage your brand, but also how you can leverage the people within your organization at the heart of social recruiting. And so when we start thinking about jobs, let me just help you understand how we differentiate ourselves in that way. At the heart, when you have a LinkedIn profile, that is your professional dashboard. That's the insights that Hari spoke about. It's also a very unique platform where we have you might have all seen that, a window called Jobs You May Be Interested In. Jobs You May Be Interested In. And what that means is we're able to look at the identity here. If we take Brian, for example, versus Erica. Brian's a finance analyst. Erica is an account executive. Erica has a full profile explaining who she works for and what she does. So does Brian. What our algorithm does on LinkedIn, it's able to look at the identity of those individuals. It's able to look at the words, the key phrases within the job that you post within LinkedIn. And it's actually able to do a match. And so you see the jobs that Brian sees versus the jobs that Erica sees are fundamentally different, but yet they're totally appropriate for the background that Erica has. And this is one of our highest levels of engagement for jobs on LinkedIn. Over 50% of our clicks come through that window that you see every day. In fact, I had lunch with an old friend of mine the other day, and he's a classic example of a passive candidate. He's a partner in a financial planning organisation. He's active on LinkedIn because he has a global network. And when we were having lunch, he said, Tim, I saw an ad today on LinkedIn. It was like it was written for me. It was like it was written for me. So he's never gone to a job board in his life because he had his own business, then it was bought out by a publicly listed company. But yet he was really rattled by this job that he saw on LinkedIn. And that's at the heart of what our proposition is. The ability, and it's really your first touch point of your employer brand, to socialize who you are and actually to create interest. And that's what's really interesting is how those decisions are made, because once you see that job, you actually want to know more about the company, who they are and what they represent. One of the things that we actually help organizations actually start to build more equity around their brand is actually we have very unique targeting on LinkedIn. What you can see here is a list of the variety of different ways we're able to profile target individual members on LinkedIn. Where they're based, what industry they're in, the type of job function, how senior they are, the company size that they work for, who they used to work for, where they studied, groups that they're connected to. And so what we're seeing more and more today, there's a notion of we want to start to build deeper relationships with people. Once again, I worked for a company recently who said, well, we need more merchandise managers, but we want to do a global recruitment. People don't know our brand. How do we elevate that awareness of our employee brand to those specific merchandise managers that we want to attract? And that's where we're able to actually start to actually put an advertisement right here on the homepage of that person that specifically has retail background, merchandise management, 10 years experience, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we're able to do is start to socialize that proposition to create that interest along with the jobs, but also from a media campaign to create interest. The other thing to start to consider is the whole ecosystem of LinkedIn. How do you actually start to create and drive higher engagement with the right quality of people. How many of us today have a corporate website, have a careers tab within their corporate website? Careers tab. Wow, okay. So essentially for those who don't have one, what we're talking about here is you have a corporate website and a tab which actually you'd be able to click on to learn more about who you are and what you represent. It's a fundamental thing that I encourage you all to start to consider, actually starts to articulate who you are, who you work for, why you're an interesting employer for any kind of candidate to consider. What we're able to do is not just replicate this type of environment into LinkedIn, but we're actually able to make it more scalable. So one of the challenges for a lot of organizations is they say, you know what, we have a careers tab, we're generating a lot of traffic, we're generating a lot of interest, but once again, it's not the right quality of people that we want. I work with a large telecommunication company in Australia. They're having 60,000 people a week come to their careers page. 60,000. And one of the things when you spoke to her, she said, Tim, quantity is not the issue here. Problem is quality. 55,000 of those people aren't the right type of people that we need in our organisation. But we're an employer that everyone's interested to work for. How do we actually get the right type of people to start to think about us and understand who we are? Because we're transforming as an organisation. And so one of the things we're able to do is to start to leverage our ability to target the right type of people and proactively take your brand out to the labour segments that you want to influence. So if you looked at your organisation, you said, you know what, I tell you where we're really challenged from a recruitment perspective is HR professionals, finance professionals, sales professionals. That's really what takes up a lot of our time. And in particular, if we look at the channels that we're currently using, we're spending a lot of money with external recruiters or a variety of other job boards that actually aren't proving to be a good return on investment. How do we get interest with those people? Well, back to the targeting that I just spoke about, once again, we're able to actually start to socialize and help you leverage your story in front of those people that you want to influence. And at a click of a button, they can directly come to that careers presence here on LinkedIn, which starts to give you a whole range of information, not just the banner here, which actually articulates who you are and what you represent, videos, a day in the life, people who work there, testimonials, information that actually helps to really give someone make you more aware of what the opportunity is and actually create that level of interest. And more importantly, the ability actually to also show the jobs that are relevant to that professional's background. From the UK, we're interested in working with a large company called Cable and Wireless, and they have this kind of presence on LinkedIn, and they really wanted to understand what kind of traffic was generated back to their corporate website from LinkedIn. They're using a variety of other channels, part of their overall employer branding strategy. What the research showed is that 36% of the traffic back to their corporate website was coming from LinkedIn. They thought that was pretty interesting. But how long? They wanted to know how long people from LinkedIn were spending on that corporate website versus the other channels. The research was quite compelling. It showed that people from LinkedIn were spending 84% longer than any other channel on their corporate website. And when you think about that, you think of before when you've made a career decision, I can tell you umpteen stories when I've made those decisions. You want to know everything you can about that company. You want to download the annual report. You want to know who the leaders are. You want to know what the values are because you're trying to make an assessment, a big decision about moving careers. And so what we're able to do, what proves to us, is that we're engaging the people that are important to their business, passive candidates who they weren't able to engage. And we're socializing their brand in a pretty powerful way. And we actually they're either applying directly for a job or they're going up for more information about the company to help make a better decision. And that's a really great result for us. Social recruiting is changing the way we actually are engaging with candidates. Historically, the big proposition from a lot of staffing organisations was, work with me, I have a database that's really going to help you get the right people into your organisation. I'm connected to thousands of people. Today, organisations want to start to build those relationships. Today, organisations want to start to socialise who they are, what their company represents, so they can build long-term relationships with people who might not be ready to leave today, but might be able to leave in 6 months' time. And we have this ability on LinkedIn where you can follow a company, right? By clicking a button here, you can follow a company. What that means is on a regular basis, that company has the ability to do what we call a company status update. The ability to share information, not just the jobs that they're open, but who they are, what they're doing, what makes them different, unique as an organisation. And that starts to build that deeper relationship, build that knowledge, build that level of awareness. And what's really exciting is today you can actually start to segment that messaging, because you might say, you know what, HR people are quite different from finance people. And we're doing some really cool things in HR. In fact, we just won all these great awards. We're the best HR team in Singapore. You can segment that message so only HR people find out about that recent award that you won. And that's a free service within LinkedIn. It becomes a very powerful way to build up your followers and build up those relationships and socialize with them. Because what you find on average, for example, on average, jobs get shared across LinkedIn network 11 times. So that's the viral impact of your brand. And last but not least, one of the things I just want to share with you on LinkedIn that I think is pretty impactful is how do you leverage your employees? To date, one of the best sources of hire is, of course, employee referrals. Does many people have an employee referral program? No, number of head nods. And part of that is you said, well, no one knows our company better than our employees. We've got their networks. How do we start to leverage their networks to bring the right quality of talent into our organisation? The challenge with employee referral programs is it's not scalable. You launch the program, you put some posters up in the kitchens, but then that drops off. Engagement drops off, and you try to sort of send out some emails and try to remind people, but it drops off because people are busy and they've got a lot of other things on their plate. One of the things we're being able to do at LinkedIn, which is very powerful, is we're able to tell you as an organisation how many of your employees are on LinkedIn, have a profile. The number one activity on LinkedIn is to look at individuals' profiles. We're able to give you an insight as to actually who are the type of people that are looking at Jonathan. What industries are they from? What kind of jobs are they from? What type of companies are they working for? What kind of geographies are they based? That kind of insight becomes very powerful because when you look at the type of people you often want to recruit, the type of companies that you often want to recruit, they are aligned to the people that your people are connected to. And so one of the things that's very powerful within our social recruiting platform is we have this advertising unit where if I was to look at Jonathan's Clark, let's just assume I'm that lady for a second. If I was looking at that takes my picture, that also says, hey, you know what? Unilever are looking for finance people. I have a finance background. When I'm looking at Jonathan Clark's profile to get a better understanding of his background and what he does, all of a sudden I see an ad here telling me that Unilever are looking for people with my type of experience. So you're able to leverage your employees in a way that's scalable and actually able to help socialize the jobs that you're actually currently promoting on LinkedIn directly to the people who are engaging with your people online. And it becomes a very powerful way to socially connect the right type of people and take advantage of your employees' networks. And the last thing I wanted to talk about from a solution perspective here for your employer brand that Hari spoke about, our enterprise product recruiter, the ability to search through the 187 million people on the platform, to use all the criteria we have actually to refine your search so you can specifically engage the type of person you want to bring into your business. One of the things that's really now, we just launched, it's very successful, or very exciting rather, is the ability actually to look, you might say, okay, here's this person's quite interesting to us. What does this mean? This means he's actually following you on LinkedIn. So now if you say you've got 10,000 followers, we're able to help tell you that when you're doing a search for people, which one of those is actually following your organisation. And so when you type that in and you start to do a more detailed search, here's Pierre who's spot on for the brief, the type of person you're looking for the organisation. We know that he's actually more open to receiving an email from us. In fact, research says 80% more open to receiving an email from you because he's already following, he's already connected to your brand. And that becomes a really powerful way to start to farm those followers and engage with the talent who are already interested and open. In fact, research is showing us that for people who are following a company, 70% are open for a career opportunity within that organisation. So now we're able to actually provide not only the insight of the right type of people, but who's more engaged with your organisation. And that's really a powerful way today, and it's a real transformational way in which you can recruit. So we talked about at a high level what employer branding is. We talked about it from a structure perspective, and we just went through some ways that you can start to think about a different approach, a more of a proactive approach to leverage your brand and engage with talent. What I want to share with you today is actually, what is it like to work for your company? How do you even measure what the perception is of your organisation? And what I want to talk to you about, something we've just launched, is called Talent Brand Index. One of the things that you're aware of on LinkedIn, we have an incredible amount of data. And what we've started to do is say, well, how do we make this data really interesting to our HR clients to really help them understand the perceptions that we see about their brand and how engaged our members are with their brand online? And so the ways we looked at this was, and we've got Rolls-Royce here as an example, talent brand reach, talent that's familiar with you as an employer. The two data points that we use are here, viewing employees' profiles and connecting with your employees. And with Rolls-Royce, we can see there's 745,000 people are within their reach. That actually, think of it like they're aware of who Rolls-Royce are as an employer. But we want to know, okay, that's interesting. That's a big market actually. But how many of those people are really engaged? So then we start to think about, that's talent interested in you as an employer. And we look at 3 data points. How many of those people are actually researching Rolls-Royce on LinkedIn? How many people have decided to follow Rolls-Royce on LinkedIn? And how many people are viewing and actually applying to jobs from Rolls-Royce on LinkedIn? And that figure comes to here of 116,000. And so that's actually a really interesting insight for Rolls-Royce to say that's a reasonable percentage. So it gives us a talent brand index, so engagement over reach of 16%. Now that's interesting information, but yet is that good or bad? What do Rolls-Royce do with that information? How do Rolls-Royce use that data to go back to their organisation as a metric to say, I'm measuring the effectiveness of what we're doing. We're taking a proactive approach. How impactful is that for Rolls-Royce? So what we're able to do is we're actually able to say to Rolls-Royce, who are the companies you compete for on day-to-day for talent? And they can give us that list. They know who they are. And what we're able to do, through privacy, we can't label who's who, but what we can show Rolls-Royce is where they sit amongst that competitive set for talent. And that then starts to give Rolls-Royce a perception of how we're actually rated, how we're perceived against our peers. Is that good, bad, or indifferent? Well, I think that's pretty healthy now when we start to get a sense. But someone's doing a better job. Someone's really taking more of a proactive approach and starting to socialise their brand more broadly. So what does that mean for Rolls-Royce? Well, we can see that if they start to invest more accurately, if they start to actually invest money to actually start to change some of those perceptions, we can break down insights to actually help them to understand where to invest that money and where they could have better impact by division and also by geography. And so this becomes a very powerful metric for Rolls-Royce because each year on year when they're changing and their HR division is evolving, they're able to use this type of data to show the impact they're having and how they're leveraging social media in a very powerful way to attract and retain quality talent. And so in summary here, these are sort of the sort of four sort of key pillar blocks that I've sort of walked you through. Creating and promoting your career's presence on LinkedIn. Advertising your jobs, looking at the professional roles that you attract today, that you're most challenged by today, and actually starting to socialise them to engage a high quality talent. And starting to build that talent network, those followers, starting to engage people about your organisation, using the status updates to start to build longer term relationships, and once utilising some of the recruitment products we have to actually recruit. And last but not least, one of the huge shifts we're seeing today, in fact, most of the clients we're dealing with are like, how do we get more of our employees on LinkedIn? How do we start to leverage their networks in a way that becomes very powerful for us to actually engage and leverage the people they're connected to because we know they're a great source of talent. So with that, I think it'd be interesting now to call up our two panelists to start to actually hear from Joanna, who's actually gone through a transformational story herself and how they're leveraging LinkedIn, and also a colleague of mine, Maggie Kwan, who recently held a very interesting role as head of employer branding across Asia Pacific for Ernst & Young, and to hear her insights as to the impact and value of having an employer brand. So I'd like to ask our two guests to come up and some chairs, and we'll have a cozy little sit down and discussion. Wonderful. Well, thanks, ladies, for joining me up here. I think that one of the things that is really going to be interesting to the audience is, as I mentioned, transformation. I think for everyone who's joined us here, they're interested in LinkedIn because it's transformational. But to implement and utilize the power of LinkedIn requires leadership and requires people to be able to influence leaders within an organization. I think before we sort of go into your LinkedIn story, I think you have a story that I was really passionate about to hear about the transformation that SingPost is going through. And I think that would be interesting to hear some insights about that journey to give us context as to then how LinkedIn's helping you in that organization.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Joanna Yeo. I'm the VP for Talent Management for Singapore Post, and that photo reminds me I need to change it. My mother thinks I look like Mona Lisa. So the story of Singapore Post. Now, I'm just curious, what do people think of when you think about Singapore Post as a brand? Just curious. The first word? Mail? Letters? But when was it any of you here in this room actually pulled out a piece of A4 paper, wrote something on it, folded it up, put it in an envelope and stuck a stamp? Remember those things? And put it into a post box. Anyone? In the last week? Wow, thank you for being a customer, a loyal one. Very often when I ask people whether when was the last time they posted a letter, very few people can remember. And it's simply because the whole world of physical mail is dropping. So in our industry, in the postal industry, physical mail is dropping at a rate of 8 to 15% a year in developed economies. In Singapore, we've arrested that decline, and it's only dropping, 2% at the most, because the rate of growth of the Singapore population has grown from 3 to 5 million in such a short period of time. But That being said, are we in the sunset industry? Yes and no. It is physical mail is still 70% of our revenue, 80% of our profits. Still a very big cash cow. So what we're trying to do now is we've gone onto this 5-pillar strategy. So obviously physical mail is still one of our pillars. We're building up digital mail as well, which is basically secure emails. We also have a retail and financial services pillar, and that's basically our 61 post offices around the island. You will also notice that we sell a lot of things in the post offices now, including, sweets and everything. But you would be surprised to know, I was surprised to find out when I joined that remittances are actually one of our biggest revenue earners in that space, because think of the number of foreign workers in Singapore who all need to send money home every month. And at Singapore Post, they do it for $5 a pop versus $20 a pop at a bank. So we are also coming up with co-branded credit cards and things like that. So that's our 3rd pillar. But where we are really trying to get an uplift in our business is in the 4th and 5th pillar, which is basically our logistics business and e-commerce. Now, very few people know that we operate outside Singapore as well. So in Singapore, you see our blue vans running around as speed post. Outside Singapore, we run a company called Quantium Solutions that exists in 10 countries now. So let me try and rattle off those countries to impress you. India.
We'll take your word for it.
India, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan. Okay, and we're actually looking to grow those networks as well. So we're trying to pair that up with the 5th pillar, which is e-commerce. Now, how many of you shop online? Where do you go to shop online? I go to Amazon still. And what we're trying to do is to build almost, to replicate an Amazon for Southeast Asia right here in our backyard, because we're sitting on a population of 600 million people who have actually money in their pockets to spend and want to buy online. And so we're building. We brought on an e-commerce team now that's building the platform to bring vendors on. So they're going to handle everything from product sourcing up to the point of order taking and payments. And then where we come in with our logistics network as well, we're going to come up with an e-fulfillment solution to tell vendors that, look, hey, you've got all these sexy websites and you sell stuff. Let us do your warehousing, your pick and pack, your customs clearance, your last mile delivery, because we're in the postal business and we also have a logistics network if you're willing to pay a little bit extra.
So putting that in context of that change,
yep,
and heading up talent acquisition,
yeah,
there was perceptions there of what SingPost has probably been educational for everyone, certainly been educational for me.
Yeah.
What instant challenges does that put to you when you're looking to change the business, which means change the type of people coming into the organisation, I imagine?
Right. So talent management is a very big word. All I need to do, my job is actually to find the right people with the right skills to the job to produce the right results. Now, when I looked into Singapore Post, a lot of people think of us still as a government entity. Wrong. 2003 listed already on the stock exchange. Okay. But they are right, because mail is still 80% of our revenue. A lot of our talent were groomed in that steady state government, stable, regulated type environments. And now you're moving into e-commerce, which is fast paced, technology, sexy, people who operate on a totally different mindset. So our main challenge, when I came on board and they told me, oh, great, Joanna, you have 2 months to find us a head of e-commerce. Okay, we went to an executive search on that. But now in staffing up that function, I use LinkedIn very, very aggressively.
And so I'm interested, I want to touch on that, and then I want to talk about the reasons why. But when you started to think about the business differently and needed a different caliber of talent, why wouldn't you go to you mentioned at the start, there's obviously executive search and there's obviously job board activity. Why would you look at another channel to start to engage a broader talent, as opposed to what forced you to start thinking differently about how you attracted talent?
Okay, firstly was the cost. With apologies to my executive search friends in the room, it's not cheap. 20% of $100,000 is $20,000. And I was trying to think, and I was looking at the numbers that we actually had to bring in to staff up all our new pillars. So cost, speed, and the other piece that we also have is, we actually now have brought on a new management team within Singapore Post. Like, for example, Wolfgang Bayer, our CEO, used to be a partner at McKinsey. He ran the postal practice in McKinsey for 10 years. And he brought on a team of people, ex-Goldman Sachs, ex-McKinsey. So that became, I began to think that I was attracted to join because of that bit of proposition that they brought in, the excitement, the transformation story. So I had to think of a way to get this story across to a new pool of candidates without being held back by the perceived talent brand perceived brand of Singapore Post.
Yeah.
So
the brand is obviously perceived in a negative way amongst the type of people that
I was
wanted
targeting.
to attract.
Yes.
But you're saying the leaders
Yes.
who are there to transform, you saw appeal in their profiles.
Correct.
Okay. So let's just pause there for a second, and because I think what would be interesting to the audience is then how you actually influence change, right? I want to just circle there to Margie. Margie, the role before you joined LinkedIn, might be quite foreign to people. Like the notion of someone specifically managing an employer brand, Ernst & Young, a professional service organisation. To me, to help the audience understand, what does a head of employer branding do across Asia Pacific? Who do they report into? I think it's such a new and emerging area for people. Can you just give us some light on what that means? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of what the role of an employer brand manager, I guess it varies from organisation to organisation. In my experience, it's really about, at a high level, it's about managing the perceptions of what your organisation is as a place to work. And it's really about looking at that from an internal perspective so that you can really, engage your people in your brand, engage your people in the experiences and the opportunities that you're providing for them. So you're ultimately driving high levels of productivity, engagement, and reducing turnover. And then looking at from an external perspective, you're looking at how do I help the business? How do I put in place strategies and programs to help the business attract the best quality talent into the organisation? What that actually looks like on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, I think you can probably split the responsibilities into some strategic responsibilities as well as some tactical tasks. So at a strategic level, it really is about, okay, how do we work with the business? How do we work to develop our brand? So that's all about, the discovery process of, developing your employee value proposition, developing your messages, making sure that your message is aligned to the experience that you're delivering internally so that you've got a very authentic, employment message that you're putting out there to market. And then looking at your channel strategy. So looking at the different ways that you can deliver those messages to the audience. And I guess that's where the LinkedIn platform comes into it in terms of, really looking at being able to be a lot more targeted about the way that you deliver messages. And then really it's about brand measurement. So how do you demonstrate return on investment for the activities that you're investing in? The messages that you're putting out there, how effectively are you engaging your audience, and how effectively are you attracting talent and retaining talent within the organisation? So that's the strategic side of things. I think at a tactical level, it really then becomes about building programs for, recruitment. So whether that's in the organisation that I work for, graduate recruitment was a huge priority for us. So it's building campaigns, building themes and messages and all of the collateral, managing the websites, working with the experienced hire teams to develop sourcing strategies for some of your critical labour segments. So there's some of the tactical campaigns that you're looking for. But I guess ultimately you talk about change, and I think the role of an employer brand agent is really to be that internal advocate and really work with senior leadership to drive change within that organisation. So you become that real ambassador for your brand, and you start to engage people at all levels of the organisation around the story that you're trying to deliver.
Do you report through to HR or do you report through to marketing?
I reported through to HR, but I think it varies. I mean, there's a lot of debate. Actually, there's a discussion on LinkedIn happening
right.
as we speak around should the employer brand managers sit in the HR or marketing function. And I think my personal view is it doesn't really matter. You need to be able to work cross-functionally and be able to gather, a team of people from across the organisation, because it's not really about who owns the brand and who owns a program, because it sits across the whole organisation. So it's that ability to have insights around the HR priorities and the talent agenda, but also apply a marketing skill set to the way that you're actually trying to promote, your employment experience.
Yeah, interesting. And just thinking, Joanna, back to, you've identified the need and the opportunity to change. How did you then go back into and say, hey, we need to do things differently? How did you get the sort of mandate, if you will, to actually sort of swim against the fishes, if you will?
Okay, so we all work in corporate, so we've all got policies to follow, right? Number one being procurement policy. So always have to go and look for 3 vendors, right? So even if you've identified LinkedIn, I actually actively went out and looked at different solutions that could help me access talent in regions, because you've heard the countries that we operate in, and also to give me a platform to actually look for candidates. So I went to other job boards. Can I mention their names here?
We don't have to mention their names. We can just say job boards. I think that will make the point.
Yes. I went to other job boards and LinkedIn. So I went to 2 job boards and LinkedIn. And then when I compared, it's actually comparing apples to oranges, because one of the struggles with job boards is, you get thousands of applicants. Every man and his dog will apply, and you're trying to get an air stewardess applying for an investment analyst job, and it just doesn't work. So what I liked about LinkedIn was the fact that it's very targeted, and they actually proved to me, because I actually had a digital marketing manager position to fill, and Singpost usually doesn't hire digital marketing managers. So when Atul and the sales guys came and sat down with me, I said, okay, digital marketing manager, this is my JD. They actually punched in all the keywords and came up with 10 candidates on LinkedIn in Singapore who fit my profile. That sold me quite quickly. And in fact, so what I then had to do was I had to go and sell LinkedIn internally. And I think that for me was the biggest challenge, because a lot of people in your organizations will think of LinkedIn as a social media tool. They think it's Facebook, so why should we pay for Facebook? It's free, right? So that became my challenge, and I had to take the marketing presentations from Atul and say, at that time 170 million profiles, 21 million in Asia, these are the countries we're operating in. There are profiles in there, and I actually had to sell exactly as they were selling within my organization to prove that I believed it. And then secondly, we're mid-year, right? I did this in about April, no budget. So I don't hold the budget either, because I'm strategic HR, the real HR person holds the budget. So I actually went to my counterpart and I said, look, this tool is really going to help us, because we need to grow in all these regions. We need to grow in e-commerce. And so I kind of struck a bargain with her. I said, we looked at where the budget was and where we had money to spend, and it turned out to be executive search. So I struck a bargain with her. I said, how about if I fill, at this $100,000 middle manager type positions, if I fill 3 of these positions through LinkedIn, that would be our return investment, deal or no deal. So she looked at me and said, okay, deal, quite reluctantly, but so I had to quickly make sure that we actually did that. So I posted that first position, digital marketing, signed the contract, got the job post up. From the moment I posted the job to the moment the candidate accepted was 6 working days.
Wow.
Don't ever set such a high benchmark for yourselves, because it's downhill from there. Okay? So everybody got so excited. So I started getting more and more, requests to post on LinkedIn, to the point that I ran out of job slots. And I had to reposition my market mix to get more job slots.
Just on that, I think one of the things that struck me when we caught up was that because the brand really is still in its infancy, people don't really understand it, which is something I want to talk to Margie about in a sec. But what I liked about your strategy is you said, but our people who are sort of the change agents, the leaders, is where I saw the opportunity to actually help shift perception. Just share that story, because I found that quite interesting.
Tim talked just now about how you use your employees, and my CEO has a great story and a great background, and the people he brought on board have a great background as well. So what I did was, instead of using myself as a hiring manager, anytime they post, like for example, the next job I needed to post was investment manager, because we've got a bit of a war chest we need to go and invest, so we started our own investment arm, and I got to go attract the likes of Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch.
So people who wouldn't really be thinking of the next career opportunity.
Exactly. So what I started doing was I started using the profiles of those hiring managers as the hiring manager on LinkedIn, not my own profile as a recruiter. So when and any candidate looks at the job, they actually see Kiat Chan's face.
And they would be, the hiring manager, this person would be reporting to them, right?
The person would be actually reporting to them. So I use their profile. So when, you're a candidate and you say, and they go in and they look and they say, hey, this is a guy whom I'm going to work for, and he's, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, blah, blah, blah. I although it's Singapore Post, I'll forgive that for the time being. I'll apply for the job and I'll talk. So we started getting candidates, graduates from Cornell, London Business School, Stanford, people who normally would not apply to a Singapore Post.
And is it true you're saying that then people started then to seek, through those leaders, people then starting to seek out, proactively actually approaching them and saying, we've heard what's going, we know you're there, we're interested. And so a quality of candidate was actually approaching.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I mean, I think I have 2 offers on my table currently, were totally unsolicited. You remember the e-commerce unit I was talking about? We're looking at sourcing now for the commercial side. So our product managers, these 2 kids, I call them kids, 25 to 29-year-olds, who've started their own online businesses for a year, hit $100,000 sales, and then they go, this is getting a bit too big for us. We need a bit of infrastructure behind us now. So they actually research on LinkedIn and they say, hey, Singapore Post, you've actually got a logistics network. We're having, you can actually help us support, deliver, blah, blah, blah. They actually came to us they approached our head of e-commerce via LinkedIn and said, here's our business. We'd like to, hand over our online business to you on your platform. Can we join you as employees? And I've actually got their employment contracts on my table at the moment. Totally, unsolicited. They came to look for us.
It's a very powerful story in that whole social trust, ability to find and connect, which is, I mentioned, sort of is transformational. I think the interesting stuff for me there is that the brand story is still evolving there at SingPost. The people are leading that, and you're using the platform in a powerful way. I'll turn it to you, Margie, just, for those who are probably, if we were to advise here and as being an employer brand expert, what would be the steps, maybe here SingPost, but for others, if you wanted some takeaways to think about, well, what should we do to build our employer brand? Can you highlight maybe what the sort of steps are?
Yeah, sure. And I think we've actually got a slide, Tim, with just some of the key considerations that you really should be thinking about if you're just really starting off in the brand development process. The first step before you actually even start to think about building a brand is you need to make sure that you get the right people involved. So obviously engaging senior leadership in the brand development process, because they're the ones who are going to really champion it. And once you've got your brand and your messages developed, you really need to have that push down from the top of it and flow through the whole organisation. So that support for what you're doing is really important. So I can't emphasise that enough. And in terms of having the right team as well, it's really important to work cross-functionally. So we've talked about working, with should employer branding sit with HR or marketing? Doesn't really matter, but they both need to be involved in the process. So it's really important, marketing needs HR from the point of view of really being able to understand what those key business drivers are coming out of the HR function. HR needs marketing to help them promote, sell, put together the program. So it really is a collaboration. One thing that I've done in the past, and I've seen other organisations do quite successfully, is to establish like a brand steering committee. So you've got the right people, perhaps a senior sponsor, somebody from the HR marketing team, even in internal communications as well, sitting around the table and reporting back to them so that you're staying accountable and you're actually ensuring that you're not just hitting the HR agenda, but the agenda of like the broader corporate brand team and the internal comms team as well. Then when it comes to actually the building the brand itself, the first thing that we would really recommend that you do is start off by identifying what your priority labour segments are that you really need to start to hire in and engage, because especially if well, it doesn't really matter if you're in a small or large organisations, it's quite a big process to go through, and the investment and the focus should really be in those key areas where you've got critical roles that perhaps you find hard to fill, so that you are, making sure that you're investing in areas that are going to provide the best value to the business. Then the next step is to kind of understand where you are today. So start gathering insights. So we call this the research phase of the brand development process. And this can be done through either qualitative or quantitative research. So, running focus groups, running surveys to really understand, number one, what kind of employment experience am I delivering today? So what is it that what's the baseline status quo? And also, what is it that's most important to the people that currently work for me and to the people external to the market? So what's most important to our people and our candidates? And then you really want to gather and analyse that data and understand, okay, where are there some gaps, where are there some misconceptions, and where's that sweet spot where we're actually delivering and it's important to our people, so that you're actually hitting the key drivers, and that's where you want to start to develop messages to send out to the marketplace and reinforce internally to engage people in your brand. So that's all about developing your key messages, and again, prioritise those key labour segments that are most important to you as those first areas that you want to start pushing that brand message out. And then finally, it's about developing the implementation plan or communications plan. So you know what your messages are, what are the means and the methods, the channels and the different touch points that you're going to try and hit, and to communicate those messages in a way that's going to resonate and get cut through to the audience. And there's one other step that's probably missing off there, which is about measurement. So there's a lot of activity that we've talked about here. So it's normally quite a high profile activity within the organisation, really making sure that you establish up front, well, how is it that I'm going to measure? What does success look like when we start to go on this journey? Because we're really talking about brand life cycles here. We want to establish where we are today. We want to build the brand. We want to implement some campaigns to push the brand along. And then we want to measure again and say, okay, based upon what we've invested in and what we've focused on, where has that moved the needle on our brand position? So I guess at a high level, there are some of the considerations to think about.
Thanks, mate. I think we've covered a lot of ground here from a sourcing perspective and from a branding perspective. We have one video now which just summarises some of the things that we've covered from the session today, and then we'll finish with a Q&A. So there's an opportunity to see the video, have a think if there's any questions you'd like to ask either our panel members or myself, and then we'll come to a close. So we'll play the video, please.
As a recruiting professional, how do you maximize your presence on LinkedIn, the world's largest professional network, to influence potential candidates at every touchpoint on the network? Your future employees are on LinkedIn, and most of them are passive candidates. Here's how you can feature your jobs to just the right candidates in just the right context. Meet Laurie, a marketing manager. She's a typical passive candidate. She's not thinking about her next career opportunity, but uses LinkedIn to network and keep up with news related to her current job. Every time Laurie logs into her LinkedIn homepage, she not only sees a stream of relevant jobs, but she could also see this, a LinkedIn recruitment ad, the perfect opportunity for you to make a strong first impression. It's a vivid, personalized medium to let passive candidates like Laurie know you're hiring for jobs they'll love. Laurie clicks through to learn more about your company, giving you a chance to promote one of your most valuable hiring assets, your employment brand. On your career page, Laurie sees jobs that match her exact background, testimonials from employees in the same marketing role she's in, and other assets like video tours and interviews. The career page can bring your company to life, showing Laurie what it's really like to work there and people she may want to connect with. Laurie wasn't considering new employment opportunities a few weeks ago, but today she sees an update from Shannon, the marketing manager from your company that she recently connected with. LinkedIn members frequently visit the profiles of other members, just like Laurie is now. With LinkedIn, you can own the ad space on your employees' profile pages to better engage passive candidates with relevant job opportunities and your employment brand. Laurie's delighted to see a picture of herself alongside a new job listing that's a perfect fit. For Laurie, there's only one more thing to do. You too can build an ongoing rapport with passive candidates like Laurie across multiple touchpoints on LinkedIn. To learn more, visit talent.linkedin.com/media.
Open to the floor if anyone has any questions that we want to cover off. That's fine. So, look, thanks everyone today for your participation. We have actually LinkedIn, our colleagues will be at the back towards if you actually do have any questions that you want to ask specifically. But thanks for your attendance and your engagement, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.